should be.
Yeah, that was rough.
It's probably a good lead into being crushed if we're going to talk about intensity, right?
Yeah, it is. Yep, that's why I crushed myself first. That would be just right. Set the tone.
Just to get it straight.
Yep.
So we want to talk about two things today. Sorry for the pause. We've just been so busy. It's impossible. We even have a 3-year-old that may interrupt us with some shenanigans at any time. So
I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah, this is kind of one of those spontaneously risky podcasts. But we wanted to talk about intensity, and so this in some ways is designed for people that are in our program to get a better understanding of how to make things work for them, or just in general, like if your programming isn't quote unquote working for you, really what's not working is just the intensity and the frequency and volume. That's really the only thing. Everybody's a little bit different. So there's that individual differences. There's also things like drugs. Like if you're on a recovery aid like steroids, things are going to be different for you.
Younger, recover faster.
Yeah. Or like if you've been doing something for a longer period of time, you need less to maintain what you have, but maybe you need a little bit more to push something, to get 5 pounds. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about that kind of like merges with this, because it's kind of the same thing, is the flack about that people are throwing at minimal effective dose training. And not because I'm saying that what I'm doing, I don't even know if it's minimal effective dose, because I don't even know. My goals aren't anything crazy, so what's effective for me? But it bothers me because it's an English language fault. Like, if it's an effective dose, it's effective. So when people say that it doesn't work for them, it's like, well, that's not an effective dose. Then you're not doing it right. That kills me all the time.
Yeah, totally.
Minimal effective dose doesn't work for me. Yes, it does if you do it. I think because it just like the connotation of minimal effective dose, it like lights people's egos up, and they're like, "Oh, I work hard. I'm working hard." Like I gotta work too hard to.
I mean, that was my measurement of a good workout for years. Was did I do more? Like I always needed to do more weight, more sets, more reps.
Right.
More tired, more crushed, more sore.
Yeah.
That was always a marker. I think everybody at some point, if you like training, you gravitate towards that.
Yeah. And I mean, minimal effective dose just essentially means that you have taken the time to figure out exactly how much work you need to do to get the results you want. And so if you are, going for Mr. Olympia, your training program is going to look way different than somebody's who, like me, who I'm 46, I'm on HRT, I have kids, I'm busy, I'm running a business out of the house. Like, I don't have any ridiculous goals. I hit, professional level dancer when I was young, and I don't know if I have the drive to like go crazy again, I know what it takes to get to a level like that, and it's a lot. But again, a minimal effective dose for a professional, for a competitor is different. And a lot of people like to train like they're a professional or a competitor. It's like, why are you doing that? Like, especially if you're not going to commit all of the other areas of your life to supporting that volume of training. It's like you're just beating yourself up in the gym because you feel like there's this weird penance. Like, people have to work out for penance. It's like, I have to be working out all the time. I've got to be putting in all this volume, all this training.
Yes.
Because I'm afraid not to. Like, I'm afraid what that says about me, or I'm afraid what is it? Like, people get so worried that it's not going to work if they're not constantly hitting the button for more.
Well, volume gets shoved down our throats pretty much wherever you look on the internet for training. Like, we all just equate to progress as more work. And at some point, you're going to tip the scale to where there's more work than your body can effectively recover from and still have energy to fucking grow muscle, get more endurance, whatever. Like, but, I mean, I can say as somebody who trained like that for way more years than I haven't trained like that, it was a hard transition to really convince myself that I didn't need to do that anymore. I mean, especially, I feel like the longer you do it, the more it gets ingrained. And a lot of my training was so geared towards what my ego wanted, like taking that away, I did feel like I'm going to lose all this that I've worked so hard to gain. And now I laugh when I look back and like think about what I used to do versus what I do now to make progress. It's shockingly minimal. But I don't think about it as minimal. I just think about it as this is what it takes to do that, and I can feel good while I'm training. Like that's
and you're
a miracle.
you're constantly training, but it's also because you're training all of your tissues. Like you're not neglecting stuff. Like that's
Totally.
also really hard to do, and that's very time consuming. But a lot of people are just they're putting all of their time on their quads. You know, like they're doing three
squat,
sets
a press, a deadlift,
3 days a week of squatting, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Which really, like, that would just destroy me. I couldn't do 3 days a week.
That would crush me now too. But you know, again,
like five by five or.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 40 now. I don't
3 by 10.
recover like I did when I was in my 20s. When I was in my 20s and I was doing CrossFit and Olympic weightlifting, I squatted 4 days a week and I deadlifted and hinged at least twice a week, plus whatever volume was in Metcons. And I totally got stronger, but I felt beat up all the time. And I had lots of other joint related issues, you know. But like the overall training time back then was probably 3 times what my overall training is now, and I'm doing strength training 3 days a week, 3 days a week of jiu-jitsu, conditioning 3 days a week. I mean, it's like 9 sessions, but that's a way more stuff than I was doing before. And yeah, I mean, I continue to make progress as a, you know, middle-aged person, and I'm not beat up. It's wonderful.
How did we get middle-aged? It's crazy.
Shit sneaks up on you, man.
Yeah. Yeah, so that whole, like, I think that the people think about if you start trying to figure out what you can get away with, you know, like how, and to me, it's not necessarily getting away with it, it's optimizing, you know, like you're wasting your time if you're doing more than you need to do, period, you know, and if you have goals and you're not seeing results, you're not doing enough, you know, and then what is enough? And that's the question that we're kind of trying to discuss here is that when things aren't working for you, it's a matter of, a lot of the times it's intensity. And so one of the things with the internal strength model, they like the one set to failure. One set to failure is great and it works, it does work, but it doesn't work if you're not really doing it right. And then you may be waiting too long. Like some people may see improvement if they go like,
or you're not waiting enough time.
Could be, yeah. You could be going too soon again. But you have to play with that. You know, you have to kind of play around with it and see what happens. And you can't say it didn't work for me. Like the internal strength model didn't work for me, because it's like, it works if you pay attention and see what is happening and adjust. Like you have to adjust. There's no specific set timing. It's not saying you do 1 set per muscle group per week. I mean, if you're in the general program, you're just kind of stuck with what is programmed, but you can still play with that. Like you can still move things around a little bit. Like I'll come back onto a squat day, for example, and if I try to do the same amount of pistols and my legs just feel smoked, it's like, I'm just not ready for this. I need to wait a little bit longer. So maybe the next week you can kind of like take the squat one and move it over here and, you know, play around with that for yourself. But what we see more commonly is people having a hard time understanding not even understanding, but being able to generate intensity.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of that is for somebody who has experience training, but they've been following the kind of the classic model of reps and sets. You generally get to the point of a high intensity thing just by the sheer amount of work that you're doing. Like you have to focus way less on how hard this is. You're just like, I got to do 5 sets of 8 squats. And just because you did 40 squats, those last few squats probably got really hard, and maybe you did hit the right intensity to tell your brain to grow more tissue or whatever, right? But when you take the reps and sets away and you say, I need you to go to failure in 60 seconds, well, how the fuck do you know what weight to do to get to failure in that amount of time unless you try it a few times? And if you're used to waiting to get your legs tired by doing a lot more volume, it's hard. It just takes practice to do that. You really have to figure it out. And I mean, I'm 2 years into training that way, and I still get it wrong sometimes. I just think I can do this weight for this much time, and sometimes it's just too much weight, and I I hit failure way too early or I go too long, and then I know for next time. But it's not.
There's also days for me where I just don't psychologically have it in me to go to failure. Like
It's
I quit. And it looks like I'm failing. Sometimes it even feels like I'm failing, but I'm not really failing because I just am so sick of doing it that I get to that point and it's like,
it's a decision.
oh, I
Totally.
think I'm gonna fail, or I try, but I don't really really try with everything that I have, you know. And it also, for some people, it may be beneficial to, you know, fail a concentric and then continue some assisted reps and fail the eccentric. Um, that's another kind of means of failure. Like if you look at somebody like Dorian Yates, and it was funny because this was like a minimal effective dose thing that I commented on, and I used him as an example because he trained 4 days a week, 45 minutes a session, trained a muscle group about once a week, and yeah, he was on gear, but that's what he did, and he figured it out because he said I had to wait until I was recovered to go again. If I went sooner than that, it didn't work for me. It worked against me basically, and so that to me is him figuring out, and yeah, a champion level, but champion level minimal effective dose, and that's in my interpretation of it. So but that's what he was doing, is he was failing at like, I am not leaving anything on the table. Like I will have zero energy left in that tissue, like mechanical stress to the point of it is just done kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Which again, maybe that's not appropriate for everybody. So if you're that person that intensity isn't appropriate for, then a one set to failure, it's not relevant to you. Like it's not going to work. That's not your style. There's a good number of good reasons that you're not going to go to failure. One is what I just said, where you're just not feeling it and you're not doing it, and you got to be honest with yourself. Did you put everything into that? If not, then you got to do more.
Well, yeah, and then you have all of the other folks out there that just don't need that much intensity on their muscles until they maybe improve some underlying parts. Like if you
Right.
have a shitty hip joint, there's no need for you to take squats to failure because your goal really should be to make a better hip joint. It doesn't mean that you can't do some kind of leg related strength training. It just doesn't need to be the most intense thing that you do, because the intensity is what's telling your brain what the priority is. And if the
Right.
priority is like, I want muscles, you'll get more muscles, but at the cost of sacrificing your hip joint because it can't hang.
Yeah.
I felt that in the beginning though, like that first maybe like 6 weeks of training using the internal strength model when we got back from the certification. I was like, sweet, I'm gonna squat 1 day to failure every week. And like the first 3 weeks, I went up, I got a little bit better, I could go a little longer, I really sort of figured out what that feels like. It probably took me 3 or 4 times to feel that, like, oh, this is what it feels like to put every ounce of my soul into standing up, and the bar and the weight is still pushing me back down, because that was something that I just hadn't experienced that level of intensity. It always was a conscious decision to stop. But then, like that 5th and 6th week, I went back and tried to repeat the same intensity and the same weight for the same time. I was off by like 30 seconds. Like I couldn't even do the amount of work that I could do 3 weeks before that. And it wasn't because it wasn't working or I was getting weaker. It was because I wasn't fucking recovered. A week wasn't enough time for me to get back and hit that same level of intensity. So now the right balance for me at 40 is 2 weeks. I can do a set of squats that's really intense to involuntary muscular failure every 14 days, roughly. Sometimes it's a little bit longer if I don't feel it, you know, like if it's one of those days where I'm like, I just can't push myself that hard. But that's been enough to PR my lifts, to put some size on my legs, which are the 2 things that I've been training for. And it's like, holy shit, I can do that in 1 set every 2 weeks. Like that's nothing. I used to squat 4 days a week. My numbers now are better than they were when I was squatting 4 days a week, and I'm way less now. I mean, it's
Yeah.
You know.
And I mean, you could still even play around with more. Like, well, what if I do it anyway once a week and see what happens, you know, and or maybe do that for a few weeks and then take a little bit of a break and, you know, wave it a little bit. You can play around with this stuff, you know, to optimize your results. Like that's
It's not
the
even that
thing.
you can, like you kind of have to. You
Yeah.
have to do some individualization because everybody's fucking different. Everybody's got different training history and recovery abilities and age and stress levels. Like all of those things take an effect on how that stuff works. And if you're not trying to tweak it a little bit, you're missing out, really.
Yeah. And there's also another like interesting group of characters I've discovered, and I think a lot of it for me is female clients, and I'm not sure if this is possibly because we're more kind of endurance fiber, slow twitchy, but like not just can't, like you can go forever kind of a thing. Like, and I have that on certain things where it's like, this weight is so heavy that I can't even really do this. Like, it just is a joke. Like, I can't, like, for a lunge, for example, like, I'll do whatever, however many pounds on a lunge, and it's like, this is dumb. And I go down 5 pounds, and I can do it for, like, 2 minutes of hell. And it's like, this is also dumb. But it's, there's a weird gap in there where it's like, why can't I make this fail in that time frame? And I've found a lot of female clients that have a really hard time hitting failure in those shorter time frames, at least initially.
There was that muscle glycogen thing, like comparing like marathon
Women are
distance
just
exertion.
we're better endurance. Like we run
right.
out of muscle glycogen like at 29 miles, and men do it 19 miles, something like that.
I mean, there's also like, I'm sure there's a genetic component to that. Like people have, a different spread of like slow twitch, fast twitch, and all of that stuff. I mean, your connective tissue, all those things play a role in your ability to generate maximal strength. Like there's probably that component too, that people are just different.
Yeah.
But again, like that's something that you figured out, and you have to, work within those parameters of what you know when you're trying to train that.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing I think we've probably said this before, but like when you're training with the goal of time and intensity and not reps and sets, the nice thing is that even if you don't get it right, like it does different stuff depending on the time. Like if your goal was to try to hit a hypertrophy stimulus, but you went too long to do that, well then it ends up being hypertrophy of slow twitch fibers. So you're just getting more endurance. Like if you fail in the desired time, you're still getting something positive out of it, in addition to your learning about like, how could you do? Did you do 95 pounds for 60 seconds, or did it take 90 seconds to fail? Whatever. Like that's all information that you can use to fine tune that as you keep going, which is dope. It's not like, a lot of the time, like comparatively, if you're doing 5 sets of 8 squats and you get through that 8 reps and it's like you didn't hit the right intensity, it didn't do the thing that you wanted to do. You just did 40 reps and maybe you're a little bit more efficient at that squat. But if your goal was to grow tissue, you didn't do that, but you still hit your right numbers. You're like, I did 5 sets of 8. I must have done it right. I mean, I didn't think I did that for a really long time with reps and sets. Like I got used to knowing what these reps should feel like, and I probably wasn't pushing the intensity enough to where I was grinding out a couple reps.
It's obviously, I mean, we're also not saying that doesn't work. Like we're not,
of course
we're not saying that volume doesn't work. We're just saying that it puts a lot of extra wear and tear on your tissues for what? Like if you could optimize that with less, why wouldn't you? Like it's better for you long term. Because honestly, like that's at this age, but just in general, when you train, you should think about that. Like if you're training, it's one thing if you're training for a sport, like if you're training to be a powerlifter, if you're training to be a strongman, if you're training to be a whatever, where you have to be the best at something, you have to be the biggest, you have to, etc., then optimal for you is going to be brutal, and it's not going to make your body feel great. It's like probably impossible to get to that level of competitiveness and have it feel good. The rest of us, though, are training to be healthy. We're training to be, to look good, maybe a little bit of an ego thing, but like I'm not trying to sacrifice my joints for my looks. Like I'm not into that. Like I don't.
Totally, but
I want to age well.
But even then, like it's somebody who is at the highest level of whatever their sport is, like they could still transition to training in this model and still probably have more longevity out of it and not be beat up like they are. I mean, there are certain sports, like if you
could do it better, probably.
You could do it better. CrossFit, like there is a component of CrossFit, if you're competing in CrossFit, that you're going to have a ridiculous amount of volume that you have to do over 2 days, right? Which you obviously can't train like that.
Here's the dog.
Oh, yeah, get the dog. Now, in that case, you might have to have more. You have to have more volume as part of your training. However, even for that, for the level of endurance that you need to repeat workouts over 2 days, there still is an optimal level of that where you're not getting any extra, that your body's having to allocate resources simply to recover damage that occurs. And that's really like when we're saying like a lot of volume versus doing this minimal effective dose. That's the difference. You're trying to hit the right intensity to send the signal for your body to make the change that you want to make, hypertrophy, maximal strength, endurance, whatever, without the extra energy needed to recover muscle damage. Because muscle damage is costly on your energetic reserves to grow shit. Like, it's just, there's only so much to do everything.
There's a cost to overdoing, basically, and there's not a cost to optimizing and underdoing, other than like the egotistical, like letting go of like that comfort of doing
more.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, why is that comforting to people? Like, I'm doing.
There's this fucking hilarious. It's not hilarious, but it's like a audio clip that people use on Instagram for their reels, and it's like Joe Rogan talking about, like, if he works his ass off in the gym, he at least knows for that day that he's a better person because he fucking suffered so much. And it's like, I mean, I get that feeling because I've felt that way before, but when you really think about like what the message is of that, it's like, that's part of the fucking problem. Like, we're putting our value on how much volume we do in the gym. I'm a better person because I did 40 squats a day instead of 30, like that when I was a punk bitch last week or whatever, you know, like, it's really.
I mean, there's a little bit of nirvana that happens, you know, when you do some things really intensely, but
as somebody who was, I can admit I was addicted to volume and feeling fucking crushed and sore. Like, that for a long time was like, that was the only marker of a good workout, was how sore I was the next day or two. When you get good at doing the right intensity, like today I did a Zercher deadlift continuous tension set. So basically, like, continuously moving that bar with a rounded back until I hit absolute failure. It took me 43 seconds or something like that. I felt just as proud of that effort, and I had no desire to do any other sets of that. Like, it still triggers that, like, nice endorphin release of, holy shit, I did something really hard, but I didn't do any extra. I just did, was as hard as it needed to be to make the change that I wanted, and I had no desire to do anything else, and I still feel good about it.
Which I have to get this out because I'm going to forget if I don't. But so if we're talking about how if that one set might not be working for you for whatever reason, if the intensity is not there, if your joints aren't quite optimized and going to failure is not great, you don't have to then revert to a 3x5, a 5x5, whatever. You don't have to go back to high volume. All you need is one more set. And maybe 3 sets. Go ahead, throw 3 in there. But like, research is coming out really recently. If you guys follow Chris Beardsley, he's great with all this stuff. That like your first set is really where the money is. The second set is like, okay. And then the third set drops off a little bit. And the fourth and fifth sets are literally a fucking waste of your time. So you don't have to hop back to that, like, the internal strength model isn't working for me, I'm freaking out and just going to go back to Smolov, you know, like, you don't have to do that. Again, you just have to tweak it, play with it a little bit, figure out why it's not working. And if you're not able to produce the intensity for whatever reason, like I have a client that literally pukes when he maxes out deadlifts and he goes to a public gym. Not appropriate. You know, like, he can't do it. So you just have to just play with it. Like, one more set is fine. It's like a finisher upper there. Like,
yeah, or I mean, or like, you needed to do that one set and you wanted to hit failure in 60 seconds and it's 90 seconds later and you're still going, well, fuck it, keep going. Can you do a 2-minute set with that weight? Like, you won't want to do any extra if you do that 2-minute long set, and then, you know, next time I could probably double the weight and do this in 60 seconds. Like, just go longer, do an extra set. If you do that, even if you did 3 sets, you're still doing way less volume than you traditionally would, especially because we're really doing that, like, for one exercise. You're not going to go do 3 sets of this thing and it's like, well, I squatted, so now I need to go 3 sets of leg extension and then maybe some, like, heel elevated squats for like 100 reps for a finisher or something like that, right? Like, that's commonly what people do, but you don't need to do all that.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess that kind of sums it up. I mean, that is the, like, we talk about this a lot from the joint specific training side too. Like, somebody has, I mean, we did a workshop, a Kinstretch workshop last night with like 30 people, and every single person in there, they're CrossFitters, they all needed to work on their shoulder rotation. They all had some limitations in either internal or external rotation, and every single one of them had to work on it in a slightly different position and a different intensity. Everybody couldn't just get on the floor and get into the position that we were in, showing where we wanted them to work, and have it work well. It just didn't work because everybody's just a little bit different, and we had to talk them through what it should feel like, where they should feel it, for them to understand where they need to train their shoulder to make those improvements. And this is the same. It's the same thing for muscular training. It's the same for in connective tissue training. Like all of that shit has to be tweaked a little bit. We can generally tell you the guidelines to do it, but then you gotta, I said this in a post the other day, you gotta like look and think about it and practice. And you may not do it the first or second time. It might be the third or fourth or fifth time. But who gives a shit if you figure it out? You're still training.
But at least you're optimizing too. I mean, that's the other thing is like training should not be mindless. Like you shouldn't just like walk up to the rack, bust out your lift, put the bar down the whole time you're thinking about how your ass looks in your leggings or whatever, you know, like you should be thinking about how things are feeling, where you're feeling stuff, you know, and that's been, we've been talking about that more and more lately, and maybe we'll do that on another podcast, but like, your training, you have to intuitively adjust your training to suit your needs and generate the results that you want. If you give something an honest shot and you're truly doing it as it's intended to be done, if you're not, then figure out how to adapt it. So if you're not hitting the intensity, add another set, period, done, easy. If you're not seeing the results in the hypertrophy or the strength gains that you think you should be, and you're waiting until you're recovered and you go again, maybe you need to go a little sooner. Maybe a week's too long for you. Or if every time it comes up the next week, you still kind of feel crushed and you're not able to hit what you did last week or better, then maybe you need to back off a little bit and maybe skip it and do like something more moderate that week and then hit it hard again the next week. Has to be, you got to pay attention basically.
Yeah, I mean, it works. Training works for everybody once you find your little individual nuances.
Yeah.
There's
And the
a right
mechanical
amount for
stress
everybody.
signal is the mechanical stress signal. So like hit the mechanical stress signal and then wait for your body to do the rest. You don't have to keep pushing the button when the elevator is coming. Like it's fucking coming. You see it. You're watching it. You don't have
You
to.
already pushed the button.
It's not helpful. So
That's a good analogy there.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yep, you're good at that. What else?
I don't know. That's probably it. I bet Bonnie's probably
Causing trouble?
got out all the weapons and makeup and
Totally.
Yeah.
I bet she does.
everything white is no longer white.
Yeah, but she didn't interrupt us.
Yeah,
That's
no
what-
noise. One small miracles.
Yeah.
Cool.
I feel like I had something else, but that's it. We should just stop there before I ramble on.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, anything you would like us to talk about, feel free to reach out.
Put it in the comments.
You could put it in the comments, or you could email us at info@basishpny.com.
Do it.
Yep. Cool.
Okay. Thanks for watching.